Hello YouTube. The Elder Scrolls series has quite a lot of games and other media in it, some of it really obscure. And when we look at the release order of the different games and media, we have to conclude that the games did not release chronologically. For example, the Elder Scrolls Online came out a few years after Skyrim, but it takes place about 1,000 years earlier in the Elder Scrolls timeline. So, today I wanted to take a look at the timeline and see if we can place almost every Elder Scrolls game release on it, even the really obscure ones, and the board games as well, and why not, let's add the official novels as well, to make the most complete timeline possible. So, let's roll the intro and let's kick off. Yeah, this is my version of the Elder Scrolls timeline that I made. Just to quickly explain the eras, first off we have the Dawn era, which is the time when time itself wasn't linear yet. Basically the era of creation, and the lore sources from this time are highly unreliable, and we really just don't know what happened here. We have some religious interpretations, but other than that we don't know anything. Next up, there's the Meretic era, or the era of elvish dominance. It's the era where the elves, at least once they landed on Tamriel, somewhere in the middle of the Meretic era, basically became the dominant force on Tamriel, and where like the big empires were. So like the Ayleid Empire, the Snow Elf Kingdom, the Durrani were really big in High Rock. We've had in Morrowind High Valley culture, and of course on Somerset Isles we had the High Elves. Now, then we have the First era, which starts at the moment that the Bosmers, so the Wood Elves, officially became one big united kingdom under the first King Camoran. And that era took 2,920 years. So here we have the year 1, and here there's the year 2,920. Now, why did I not put a date on the Meretic era? That's because officially time wasn't kept yet at this time. But we do think that it took about 2,500 years, since 2,500 years before the start of the First era, because there in the Meretic era you count negative time. You had the construction of the Adamantine Tower, we think. So that's the most ancient building on Tamriel, and it's basically the first recorded event of the Meretic era at the year 2500. So 2500 years before the First era. Although there are suggestions that the Meretic era may have been far longer than that. But that's the way some lore sources say it. But do keep in mind that 2,500 years may be even longer than that. Alright, so next up we have the First era ending when the Reman Empire, so that's the empire that was founded by Reman Cyrodiil and then sons and other descendants taking over the reins of the empire. That empire lost its last Reman emperor at the year 1 of the at the year 0 of the Second era. Because that's when the Akaviri potentates took over. Watch my video on the politics of Tamriel to fully understand that whole dynamic. Now that Second era took 896 years, all the way up until Tiber Septim, so the first Septim Emperor. He united all of Tamriel. And then the Third era began, which was 433 years. And then finally we have the Fourth era, which happened after the last Septim Emperor died. So that's after the events of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion's main questline. Because at that point, all of Nirn is always protected against Daedra. And we have the end of the Septim line. So you don't need Dragonborn Emperors anymore, and you don't have them either. So that's why a new era started. And that era so far is 201 years. Like Skyrim, as you'll see at the game date timeline, will be all the way at the end. But that's simply because the timeline is officially still ongoing. Alright, so now let's go to my second slide, basically. And I made a second timeline, as you can see here, which is basically just this part of the timeline, so starting at this green stripe, very much zoomed in. That is because most of the games take place in this tiny little space, and that would be really inconvenient to place all the games on the timeline. So let's do it. Let's actually start with the games that are on the big timeline down at the bottom. And that's one game in the middle of the Second era and one at the end of the Second era. Another one in the middle of the Second era, that's Elder Scrolls Online, which takes place in the far past. So that's in the year 582 of the Second era. And yeah, that basically takes place in the interregnum, as we call it. So that's the time between the Septim Empire, which started somewhere here, and the Riemann Empire, which ended somewhere here, like under the Akavir potentates. So that's in the period where there were no emperors, like no Dragonborn emperors, and people fought over the throne. Now, the second game that takes place in like the bottom timeline is this game, which is the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard. Also a really old game. It takes place in the year 864 of the Second Era. Actually, it has a little bit of a weird placing because it should be somewhere here, but then it interfered with the Elder Scrolls Online. So do just imagine that it's here on the timeline. Actually, I think I can put Elder Scrolls Online a little bit more this way, and then it kind of fits. Like, just imagine Elder Scrolls Online being a little bit more to the right, but hey, this way it fits a little bit better. Now that takes place during the onset of the Tiber Wars, so the wars where Tiber Septim was unifying Tamriel. It takes place on Stros Mackay during the invasion of Hammerfell, basically. Just after the invasion of Hammerfell, and Hammerfell became part of the Empire. And then here you play during a little rebellion on the island of Stros Mackay. There's one more game that we need to deal with, which I'll deal with before we go to the big timeline on the top. And that is basically the Elder Scrolls board game that takes place during the Elder Scrolls Online. It's called Betrayal of the Second Era. It should take place right at the same time of the Elder Scrolls Online, so that's here. And yeah, it tells some stories in the same timeline as the Elder Scrolls Online. It takes place in the year 582 of the Second Era as well. There's like just some background stories, and it has some fun stories. If you're a fan of board games, I can recommend it. Alright, so now go to the top timeline, and we'll just go through the main games now in chronological order. Officially by Bethesda, they see Elder Scrolls Online as a main game, but I figured it would be better to start with the bottom timeline first. Now, the first game in the series is the Elder Scrolls Arena. Now, the Elder Scrolls Arena officially takes place over the course of 10 years. It starts in the year 389 of the Third Era, and then goes all the way up until the year 399 of the Third Era. During this time, the player collects like the pieces of the Staff of Chaos to use on Jagar Tharn, so the guy who imprisoned Emperor Uriel Septim VII, and you defeat him at the end of the game. Now, what's interesting is that this game, along with its sequel Daggerfall, it takes place over a period of time. Now keep in mind that Elder Scrolls Online and Skyrim, which we will see is at the very end of the Fourth Era, they don't have confirmed timelines yet. Elder Scrolls Online has so much content that I can imagine it's stretching like at least 10 or 20 years. But we don't have any confirmation on that yet. Just like with Skyrim, we can maybe hear like in the future that its DLCs took place in the future. But we don't know yet. Latest game that released at the point of this video was Oblivion Remastered. So, just so you know this, in the case you're watching this in a very far future where we finally have the Elder Scrolls 6. Okay, so Daggerfall as well takes place over a period of time. So this is the time of the arrival of the agent in High Rock. So that's the year 405 of the Third Era. And then the game lasts all the way until the year 417 of the Third Era in the canon, where the warp in the West, or Miracle of Peace, depending on how you want to call it, takes place and the game ends. Now, next up we have Morrowind, which does take place canonically all in 1 year. Some people speculate that the DLCs took place in further years, but we don't have official confirmation on that as far as I'm aware. So yeah, it's all in the year 427 of the Third Era. And in this time you of course defeat Dagoth as the Nerevarine. Just like with Oblivion, where all of its DLCs and its main story apparently also take place in the same year, which is 433 of the Third Era, which is at the same time the last year of that era. So yeah, that's the same year as you escaping from prison after Emperor Uriel got assassinated, or actually they let you out of course. And of course the closing of the Oblivion Glades all takes place in the same year 433 canonically. And after the year 433 the Fourth Era starts, because then of course we are out of Septim Emperors. Now, just to go with the end of the Fourth Era real quick, that's of course Skyrim in the year 201 of the Fourth Era. And yeah, it might be that we will get a further Fourth Era timeline. Like, I cannot imagine that the Fourth Era ends in the year 201. But yeah, for now it does, since Skyrim ends at 201. and also begins at 201. There are again speculations in the community that the DLCs may take place in 202, but we don't have any confirmation on that, so for now 201. Now, next up we have some of the spin-offs that take place in the 3rd and 4th era, so that's in the top timeline. First of all, you have the Elder Scrolls Legend, Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire, which is a game where you experience like a side story to the Elder Scrolls Arena and give some more lore on the period where Jaeger Tharn ruled. You basically have to free the Battlespire, and you get in there after Mehrunes Dagon's forces kind of trashed it. I made a whole video on its story, which is in the description. Actually, in the description there will be videos on Battlespire, Redguard, this board game, and some other things that I'll tell you later. I didn't make videos on like the main game, since I presume those to be like common knowledge, but on most of the like little spin-offs in this timeline I made videos, so I'll put them in the description in case you want to know like their stories in depth. Now, next up, let's talk about a game which also takes place during the playtime of the Elder Scrolls Arena, which is the Elder Scrolls Travels Shadow Key, which is a really obscure game. Again, made a video on it if you want to know the whole story. Which was made for the Nokia N-Gage, which was a very obscure little handheld gaming system by Nokia, and it's a pretty rare game, and it's probably the most playable, at least if you manage to get an emulator running, of the games of like the early Elder Scrolls era, at least if you have like decent maps, which the UESP has. Since the gameplay is pretty doable, unlike Battlespire and Arena and Daggerfall in my opinion, unless you're playing Daggerfall Unity, which are all like pretty aged, this still has pretty doable gameplay. It's worth a try if you're like willing to set up an emulator and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it takes place in the year 397 of the 3rd era, and Battlespire takes place 1 year later in the year 398 of the 3rd era. Now, another game that a lot of people don't really like, but I personally kind of defend, is the Elder Scrolls Blades, which is like the mobile game that Bethesda released in, I believe, 2019 or 2018, one of the two. And that game takes place 5 years after the end of the Great War, which ended in the year 175 of the 4th era. And this game takes place in the year 180 of the 4th era. Now, this game is pretty monetized, but if you're willing to wait a bit for like your stuff to grow, like in your typical mobile game spiel, it can be a pretty fun game. It has some cool like lore additions. The story is fine, nothing great, but it's fine. You fight against like a resurrected evil, which is cool. Pretty like you could do worse for a mobile game, like to waste your battery and like your time with on like the bus or like on a train. Yeah, can definitely recommend it, although if you're getting it on like the Nintendo Switch, which is like a home console-ish, I cannot really recommend it, since it's like really meant to be played in short bursts, unless you have like a lot of like money to spend on the game, which I wouldn't recommend, since it's pretty much a dead game at this point. Still worth a try before they take the servers offline eventually, at least in my opinion. Alright, next up, the other mobile game, Elder Scrolls Legends, which also released on PC. Now, Elder Scrolls Legends, the card game, it has 3 campaigns that we can date, and one campaign, which is the Shivering Isles campaign, which we kind of presume takes place somewhere in the 3rd or 4th era, but we are not completely sure on the timeline there, as far as I'm aware. Now, the first campaign that we do know the timeline of, which is also canonically the first campaign, is the campaign during the Great War, the Forgotten Hero campaign, which takes place in the year before the Great War ended, so in the year 174, up until the year 175. Like, I didn't make a little thing here, but it's supposed to take place like over the course of the final year of the Great War. Then we have, in the year 188, the campaign of the Dark Brotherhood, where you see the fall of the Dark Brotherhood happen. And then in the year 201, so together with Skyrim, or maybe like a week or so before Skyrim, there's the Clockwork City campaign, which is pretty cool. Yeah, this game is offline, but I did make videos like on the different stories, and they're pretty well documented online. But still, I figured I should mention it, since this added some stuff to the lore, which is pretty interesting, especially about the Great War and about the Clockwork City. And we kind of get to know more details on the stuff that happened, like Cicero's journal during the fall of the Dark Brotherhood. So, hey, worth a mention. Another thing that's definitely worth a mention are the Elder Scrolls novels, Infernal City and Lord of the Souls. They take place in year 48 of the 4th era. Now, These books, I know, are pretty divisive. I'm currently listening to them again on audiobook. Full video on them will come eventually, not sure when. But yeah, I can recommend giving them a read, and I can definitely recommend like giving them an audiobook listen, since the narrator's pretty okay. And yeah, it's more Elder Scrolls content. There's a lot of interesting stuff in these books that even like foreshadow Skyrim. Like it's clear that the writers at Bethesda definitely gave Greg Keyes, the writer of the novel, some like lore things to work with, as these books were like meant to bridge the timeline between Oblivion and Skyrim. It's not a necessary read, absolutely not, but it's an interesting read. You get a lot of lore on like the foundation of the Mede Empire, and again, some foreshadowing on Skyrim. There's definitely some sections of the books that really drag, though. Like there's some parts of the book which you have to fight yourself through. But when you've done that, they're pretty good, at least in my opinion. Yeah, then we have another board game, which is the Elder Scrolls Skyrim the Adventure game, which is, yeah, again, the Skyrim board game. It has 3 campaigns. One campaign which takes place the year after the Great War, so that's the campaign with the Blades who flee into Skyrim, where you have to, like, dodge the Thalmor, and, like, there's a whole adventure and a whole story and a whole mystery to unravel. Made a video on that, just like I made a video on the second campaign, which takes place during Skyrim, so like during Skyrim's playtime, and a little bit before that, like a week before that, which again, pretty cool. And there's also a third campaign, the Dawnguard campaign, and I believe that also takes place during Skyrim, where like a little bit like during the end time of like Skyrim's playthrough, at least if I can remember correctly. Yeah, I'm definitely remembering correctly. Now we have some stragglers left now, as I'd like to call it, since first one that I do want to mention that we can put a solid date on is this one, which is Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion for the PSP. This game never released, but I asked help, like with this timeline, to just check it from a guy who's a really big like Oblivion PSP fan. Like he knows everything that there is to know from like what leaks about this game, and we know that it takes place in High Rock and during the Oblivion Crisis. So that's exactly at the same time of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Like this was meant to be a side story taking place in High Rock, completely separate from like the actual Oblivion story. But it just took place during the Oblivion Crisis, which is pretty cool. But yeah, then we have some stragglers left that we can't date. First one is the one that we have some idea on, which is the Elder Scrolls Travel Stormhold. Another mobile game, but like made for Java phones in the early 2000s. This game, yeah, we don't know much about it. The community thinks that it's dated somewhere close to Morrowind, since there's some characters with names that also appear in Morrowind. Or at least we think that those are the same characters, or have an idea. But yeah, it's a story of a prison break out of the Empire's prisons in Stormhold. That's basically all that we like know about this story. I made a video on the story, but we don't know exactly when it's dated. Most people presume near Morrowind, but it could well be during, for example, the Second Era, during the Riemann Empire, who also had like lands in Blackmarsh, so near Stormhold. So that might also have been like an Imperial prison from that time. The other one is the Elder Scrolls Travels Dawnstar, which is the other Elder Scrolls Travels game for Java phones. For that one, we have no idea where it is. Could be anywhere. Actually, it could be like during the Second Era, could be during the First Era, could be during the Third, not during the Fourth Era, I presume, but it might be possible. Like, literally. All that we know is that it's not close to Skyrim, since like the main baddie, like the terror behind the walls, the Gehenna, which is like also on the front of Dawnstar's cover, we know that those are extinct by the time of Skyrim. So we're presuming it's somewhere during the Third Era, since it's basically released right between like Morrowind, Oblivion, and Battlespire Shadowkey, those kind of games. But yeah, that's just a presumption. Like, it could be anywhere. And then finally, we have the recent addition to our mobile games bonanza, which is the Elder Scrolls Castles, which is the like kind of city/base builder mobile game. It's very similar to Fallout Shelter. This game we can just not place anywhere, for the very simple reason that it has characters from like all the eras, just like Fallout Shelter has like characters from like all the games in the Fallout series. So yeah, we just have nowhere to place this one, but still felt like I should mention it. Yeah. Basically, you're building a castle during the Empire's time. Like the Septim Empire time. So we're presuming, like, if we had to date it, it's probably during the 3rd era. But considering it has characters from, like, the early 2nd era, and, like, yeah, we just don't know. It's really not a timed game. Like, if there's any game which I would say is not canon, it's this one. Simply because there's so much, like, information from, like, different games, and, like, probably they will add characters from, like, different games. I believe there's even, like, a data mine Cyrodiil update or something like that, which might add, like, Oblivion characters. Meanwhile, it also has Skyrim characters from, like, the 4th era. So, yeah, makes no sense. But there I would place it if I really had to. And that was basically the whole Elder Scrolls timeline, at least with, like, the in-universe timeline. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you didn't mind me being unscripted. I think I managed to keep on message. At least I hope so. Yeah, give the video a like if you thought it was worthy. Next week we will see another scripted video again. But I felt this video was pretty necessary. And if I had to do animations for everything, like if I, for example, just wanted to show you, like, yeah, castles could be anywhere, most likely somewhere here, but it could be anywhere. Yeah, that would have been a lot of work. Meanwhile, this is, like, basically what I'm used to when I'm teaching, so I figured, why not do it? Alright, so, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you to my Patreon subscribers. I do not know, like, the final names by head that I need to mention. So look at the screen right now and you'll see their names. Yeah. Alright, thank you so much. And I'll see you again in the next video, which will be scripted again, don't worry.